Do you want to change your life without having to do any work whatsoever? Do you want the weekend to suddenly open up and feel more free and that you have more control over your life but don't want to do any work whatsoever? Well, I am here for you. I'm Vi, the Abysmal Witch, and hello, my fellow starlings. I am going to be doing some time travel with you today in my witchy, but only my witchy, perspective of the world. And we are going to mess around with the concept of what is the week and what does the weekend look like? What does the week beginning look like? Because I think that we have become trapped in a fallacy. Maybe not a fallacy. Maybe that's too harsh a word. We have become trapped in a viewpoint that leads to a place, leads to a bunch of consequences. Now, I should let you know that I am operating without a net today. That's right, no pre-notes, because that is not the type of week that I have had. So we're going to see how this goes, completely and utterly unscripted, which for those of you who know me, it means that it's not that far off of where I've actually been doing things most of my life when it comes to this stuff. How is it that we can change so much by changing your perspective? Well, at the underlying concept of that one, we've got our perspective is an important component of our loops, our mental loops. Between watching Westworld and their talk of loops and the behavioral loops that happen in the dog training that I find very incredibly powerfully useful, and more than just dog training, by the way. Loops are a thing, and we do loop. Our perspectives, when something happens, it travels into us. We have a reaction, but all of that is coded by the perspective in which we perceive it, not just on a psycho-emotional level, but also on a somatic level when it comes down to it, because it is that anticipation of pain, for instance, that will make some people supremely flinchy, my dog supremely flinchy, worried all the time, and that's due to previous experiences. But it's that perspective built by previous experience that causes that immediate overreaction to certain things, because that's what we believe, that those precursors, like seeing another dog or hearing a sound or a car coming up driving from the side, are precursors to a bad thing. And so we are anticipating, because of our perspective, a bad outcome. So that's why changing your perspective can actually lead to changing your physiology, changing your relationships, because our relationships are so deeply built on perspective. That's a podcast for a different day. Instead of relationships, we are looking at time travel, and how we travel through the week. So I had an epiphany-ish. I don't know. You could also say it was like unfurling a mystery, to give you a little witchy side of things. That is a thing in the witchy world, is having mystery experiences. That's also a discussion for another day. I'll just leave that as a floating tidbit of entertainmentary interest. The epiphany was centered around this idea of weekend. And why is it? I mean, we know why it is, right? It was God worked for 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. So we do our work first and then we rest. It is an idea that flows rather nicely from the day starts with the dawn. You get up, you do your stuff, and it is the night that is the end of that cycle. Popping over for a second to, again, a more witchy perspective. And this is relatively somewhat globally held. It is a more broad perspective. This one I did not hold as like, this is my perspective, and not that common. It is a common perspective. It's just normally I'm talking about things that are very specifically mine. Like this viewpoint that I'm trying to, or will eventually get to, is my perspective. But this idea I'm about to talk to you about is more global, at least in the witchy, Wiccan, especially Brit trad kind of world, and potentially in paganism, potentially in the European paganisms particularly. And I believe it originates out of the British Isles, but I am not a historian, so, take it for what it is. What the idea is that the day actually begins at nightfall. So instead of day beginning with dawn, it begins with dusk. And we actually see this in language holdovers from many things, such as Halloween, which is All Hallows Eve, which is the original phrase that I believe turned into Halloween. Every time I say believe, it's truly, I believe it, which means that I give it some degree of certainty, but not 100% degree of certainty. Those would be more like, this is pretty much a fact, but I always give space for me being wrong because I am delightfully imperfect, and so is my memory. Okay, so that idea that the cycle begins into darkness, that we first descend before we go up, which I do firmly believe in the power of going down to go up, and we go into darkness and rest before we come into the light and activity. The same thing with the turning of the wheel, which is the year, the moving through the year from a pagan perspective is the turning of the wheel. I say pagan because it is really quite broad, potentially more popularized by Wiccans, probably. It's certainly where I think a lot of that came in the growth of the Wiccan movement in the 80s and 90s. Anyhow, sorry for the digression. I'm also flashing right now. I was talking with an elder of the community years ago who was telling me how they'd actually originally did 6 Sabbats. So we do 8 Sabbats a year, the Sabbats being celebrations of the turning of the wheel, so the turning of the seasons. And that when he got started back in Berkeley, California, way back in the day, like 50s, 60s, I actually have interviews with him on... I think it's on terraarcanum.org. Woefully ignored site at this point, but they are there, and you can get to them, I do believe, still. Things I mean to do, the list is long, is to clean that up. So they did 6 Sabbats a year, and then they were like, well, why are we leaving out, the spring and fall equinoxes? Because they were doing the 4 fire festivals, so the cross-quarter days, and I've heard people use these phrases to mean the opposite things sometimes. This is just how I use them. The cross quarters being the ones that do not fall on solar events such as solstices and equinoxes, but rather fall at these midpoints between, familiar to the kind of the global world as Halloween, May Day, Groundhog Day, interestingly enough, totally aligns with one of them, and then Lammas in the Christian world, Lunasa in the pagan world. So that was a quick ass little primer on our normal cycle through the year. Wow. All right then. And in the Wiccan world, the new year starts at Samhain, which is Samhain, Gaelic word if I'm not mistaken, which is why those letters and the pronunciation have very little resemblance to each other. But in Samhain, it's the new year, and that's Halloween. Right? All Hallows Eve. So the start of the year starts as the point in the year when we are moving from fall into winter. It is the start of the rise of winter. It's not winter yet. Let's be clear. It's not winter yet. Not in that sense of really feeling it, but when you think about Yule or December 21st or 22nd, whatever day it falls on, for the winter solstice as the first day of winter. In some ways, yes, it's when you're really like, yes, winter has arrived. It is the first day of true on winter. Sure. Where I live, a little questionable, but our weather is mellow. Or at least it used to be when I was young. Climate change, not so much. So there, but the shift in the world around us at around Samhain, at around November 1st. So Halloween, there is this, or October 31st, let's get real, is this shift from that brightness of summer into the darkness of winter. It is you can feel it in the world. It's like Groundhog Day is a great example for us. That would be Imbolc. And is the, Groundhog Day. This is February 1st, February 2nd. Is the groundhog, does he see his shadow? If he does, it's 6 more weeks of winter, because then realistically they're saying if you have clear blue skies, you have cold weather, ergo you're not going to you're not warming up yet, so you're going to be staying cold for a while. But it's that where spring has that potentiality. You get your snowdrops, the flower, not the actual snow dropping, starting to come up. You have those first bulbs. There's that first glimpse. It's Lunasa, August 1st-ish, is when you get those first turning of the leaves, that first sense. So we begin in the descent. The day begins in the descent. We begin the day at dusk, which is actually really hard to manage as a perspective. I've tried in daily living. It's just really difficult to get there. That was my experience. But from a witchy perspective, that's why the cool magic, I think, usually happens on the eve of the Sabbath, and then the gathering and the celebration happens on the day of, because you're celebrating through the day. But really, don't you want to do magical stuff at night when it's just extra yummy? I do love me some yummy magic. All right. Whew. That was a long segue or intro or whatever you want to call it to bring us back to looking at that, taking that perspective and putting it onto the idea of the week. So if we were to take that same view, that we begin at the end, we begin at the descent, we begin in silence and stillness, we begin in that sense of darkness, then the first day of the week is not a Monday. Oh, nay. No, the first day of the week is Saturday. Well, going from a standard Monday through Friday job situation, Saturday, Sunday off. I'm going to use all of my language with that held perspective, because it is, one, the life that I'm currently living, and two, it is also representative of, I think, the high majority of people still. So it'll hold a very common resonance. Even those of you who don't live that, understand it very easily, because it is so familiar, translated obviously to your own world. Because the idea is not about the specific days of the week, it is about the days that you are not working. It is about your time of rest. Where do you start your time of rest? Let that be the start of your week. And I will also say that this comes from a place of, I was exceedingly depleted and realizing that I am not young anymore. I'm in my 50s. Rebound. No, there's not a lot of resilience left. I got to build that shit back up. So recognizing that this year and knowing I needed to do that, I realized that rest in pretty much that building of recuperation is the most critical thing in my life. Because if I don't have that first, I can't do any of the rest. Everything else will break. If I try and I go, no, work before rest, well, then I am going to break. If I do home or my dog or everything before rest, then I am doomed. Now, there's balances to this. It's not like, I'm going to sleep all the time and neglect everything else. It's about finding healthy balance. But it is critical to me. So all of this combined into going, wait a second, I do not, I say again, I do not have to have Monday as the first day of my week. No, I can have Saturday. I start in the weekend. I start my week not with having to be in that sense of, all the things I must accomplish. I do, actually. But not in I have to do it for work. I have to do it for this other thing. And only once I have completed all of this requirement will I have rest, right? So you're battling through, and your light at the end of the tunnel is that 2 days off, and you're going to jam pack everything into it that brings you joy. So you're always waiting to arrive at that place of joy. And I say, fuck that. I am starting in my place of joy. I start my week on Saturday. I get up and go, it's a brand new week. What am I going to do with this week? It is fully open. I mean, not fully open. I've got a job. I got things I got to do. So how do I want to set up my week for success? Well, I've maneuvered things around a whole bunch so that there's a whole cycle of my day that ended up evolving that is quite interesting, and is a very definite different time travel episode. But for the week, I want to do little on the weekdays, especially days I commute. It's got a lot to it. So I do a lot of what I need for the week. I do it on the weekend. Okay, here's the truth. Now, I get up ridiculously early, but still, by noon on Saturday, by noon on the first day of my week, I have reconciled my bank accounts every week, because it takes very little time when you do that. Essentially my cleaning is probably done. Laundry might be still on the go. I have planned my food for the week, mostly because I'm really working on health, and because I am doing that. I'm doing it. I've done my grocery shopping. Basically everything that I need for the week to be, decent, if not good, is done by noon on Saturday. I know that I have all the rest of Saturday. Now, I go to bed early, so it's not all that much, comparatively speaking. But I have the rest of Saturday. I have Sunday is my day to do other things, all the things that bring me joy. So I build up my rest, my resilience, my joy for 2 days. And then instead of being like, oh my God, all my joy is over, and now I have to go to work, the week's starting, and I have to go to work. It's like, no, that was the start of my week. My week started awesome. It started in the best way possible. And then Monday is not the first day of my week. It is the third day of my week. So it doesn't have this jarring end/beginning feeling, because there is a quality to those days. And they resonate in different ways with how we feel about the two sides of that coin, right? The beginning and the end. I end on Friday, so if things were tough and kind of shitty, well, you know what? By the time I go to bed Friday, it's done. It's done, because Saturday's my first day. I don't have to linger in it through the weekend. Maybe I have to work through some stuff because of the leftovers, but it's not like I'm still in that same week, and it's still part of that week and still clinging to me because it's still wrapped and woven into it. No, it is a brand new week. And so that Friday is done. The week is done. My work is done. I start fresh. And then work is not the first thing in my life. It's not. It's a very big and important component, but it is not the first thing. You could say it's the third thing, because it's the third day. So it's such an easier transition to go from the Sunday to the Monday, because it's just the going from my second to my third day. I've already prepped all for it. It just has this different feeling, because I hold this different perspective. And from there, everything has been flowing really great. I've been doing this perspective thing for a year and a half now, or something like. I don't know. I'm not good at actually pinpointing when things happened in time in my life. That is where I am not good with the time thing. Relating to actual time, I guess, the actual recorded time. Not my strongest skill set. But yeah, it has been a glorious shift. I am not going back. You could not make me go back to that other viewpoint. And you know what? Yeah, I don't do so much on the weekends and going out and stuff. I wouldn't be. I wasn't anyways. And I wonder sometimes how the shift of perspective would affect that. I think it would stitch me in better to the rest of my week, because instead of, if we thought of each week as, a length of cord, and we cut it, and then we draw another length and we cut it at the end of the week, there's that feeling that because you're cutting, if standard normal perspective, you get to the end and the cut is between the Sunday, Monday, that what we do on Sunday and Saturday belong to the previous week, not to the coming week. And so we don't consider, I swear, this perspective, this is just my opinion, my perspective, that viewpoint pulls us into behavior that allows us to blatantly ignore that cut is not actually something really that impacts how our bodies, for example, are going to feel from what we do on the weekend into how we're going to feel during the week. it doesn't help that at all, but I swear it makes us think it does. That I can just do whatever I need to, like all these things, and cram it all in out of desperation because, oh my God, it's going to be gone so soon. I don't have that feeling of gone so soon. I mean, I know it's going to go quickly because it is. It always does. But it's my first days. So there's room and there's space and there's choice. And because I'm closing off the week, I'm doing that cut on the Friday to the Saturday, that just the Monday is already incorporated on like a subconscious level into how I'm moving through my time. All right, I'm just going to leave it all at that because I want to get in an Abysmal Perspective episode on this commute this morning. So I hope this has been interesting for you. I invite you to take the When Does Your Week Start challenge and flip it around and try out what it's like to live with your first day off as being the start and the first day of your week. All right, take great care of yourselves, my darlings, and I will talk to you anon. Bless be.